Hi folks, Troy with V-Twins to V8s. I'm back. I'm going to do another video series. This time I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I know I've been doing a lot of paint work. I've been doing a lot of stuff with my motorcycles and helmets and all that stuff. So mostly it's the summer season here in New England, so it's all about the motorcycles. I do have my other project, my Chevy pickup, and I pick at it in between doing my other things. Well, I'm back on to put the V8 in the V-Twins to V8s. I've got this small block Chevy that I use to do the mock-up in my Chevy pickup. So it was all painted up because it was used as a display piece in a speed shop that I had. So I just took that and I used it to set it in the frame and get my front suspension compressed and mock up my exhaust and all my other brackets. I'm all done with that. This engine I've decided I'm going to use in the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video and I'm going to show you everything that you have to do to rebuild the engine. So I'm going to start now. I got the engine on the stand. It doesn't have any oil in it. It's got all this dress-up stuff on it. It looks really pretty and everything, but I rebuilt this engine probably 30 plus years ago. It was in another car that I had. It was my first car. So I rebuilt this engine when I was 16, 17 years old, and it served well. And then it went into took it out of the car, put a big block in the car because you needed more, and this became a prop. Then sat around, and now here it is. So what I'm going to do is I am going to disassemble this so we can get it out to the machine shop to have it hot tanked and have the block boiled, hot tanked, new freeze plugs, new cam bearings, mic the bores, and make sure we don't have to bore it out or anything like that. So sit back and relax. I'm gonna get some stuff together. We'll take this apart. I got it on the stand. There's no oil in it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start taking it apart. Alright, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take off these super sexy old school Edelbrock valve covers with these wing nuts. That'll be nice and easy. Alright, so first thing I'm gonna do is I get the valve covers off. I'm gonna take this intake off. Bada bing. It's like when I set this up, I put my oil pump drive in a little plastic bag right inside the valley here. So while we're taking accessories off, we'll take the dipstick out. I'm going to pop this water pump off. Alright, so I got my bolts out. Out of camera over here, I got a nice big bench. Lay everything out on the bench. Once I get this all disassembled, what I'm going to do is I'll get everything all bagged and tagged and labeled, and put it in a nice storage container, and then I won't have to worry about where all my stuff is when I get ready to reassemble my engine. We'll pop the heads off now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to use these heads or not. I might buy some high performance heads. So I'm not going to take all of these rock arounds off. I am just going to take and loosen all of these rock arounds so I can get my push rods out. So I'm just backing all these off. So my nuts about even with the top of the stud should be about enough to get your push rods out. Alright, so I've got all my nuts backed off. I'm going to show you where we're at here. Okay, so here we are. What I've got is all of these nuts are what does the adjustment for your rockers, for your valves. So what I've done is I've just loosened these up so I can take these and flip them off to the side. Once I get them flipped off to the side like this, some of them I might have to loosen up a little bit more, but once I get them flipped off to the side, I can just take all my push rods out. Certain things have to go back in certain places, and it's not really critical for the push rods to go back in the same hole, so we don't have to worry about marking them and things like that. Let's say you got a cam and you want to reuse your cam, I would recommend, and I was always taught this way, that each lifter should go back in the same location so it rides on the same cam hole. Some guys will argue with you, say it's overkill, it doesn't really matter, but I think that everything develops a wear pattern. So when you match them up, it's just the best. And you know, for the amount of few minutes that it takes to mark them and put them back in the same way, I think it's kind of cheap insurance, actually. All right. Now, I'm leaving these right on here. I got them all flipped off to the side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all my lifters out here, and I'm not going to probably run these again, but this is a good cam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these out on the bench, and I'm going to mark them so they all go back in the same holes, and I'll bag this whole cam up in case I want to use it on another project. So out of the camera sight right here, I am going to lay these all together, front to rear, left to right. And if you've got an old engine, what happens sometimes is right here on this edge, you'll develop a little bit of, you know, not corrosion, but like grease and smudge and stuff like that. So when you go to take this out, it'll be hard. You'll feel like you're stuck. That's just because you got some dirt in there, some sludge, so to speak. And if you work at it a little bit, you can just take a pair of needle nose pliers and pull these right out. But you know, this engine's really clean, so I'm just gonna basically take all these out. Once again, keeping it in line. All my lifters going in the right spot. If you're having a hard time getting a grip on them, you can turn the engine so that cam lobe rides up and it makes it easier to grab a hold of it. Like I said, you know, what I have going on here is you know, things are pretty clean. So I don't really have a lot of problem. If anything, they're so smooth and slow. So now we've got all of our lifters out. I think we might want to take and pop these heads off. That will be now, as far as taking the heads off goes, bolting them back on, there's a sequence to it. Taking them off, there is not. So you can unbolt it any way you want. I like to unbolt them from the outside to the inside. The bolts don't need to go in a certain place or anything like that, so you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and get these heads unbolted. I like to leave, you know, a couple of bolts in just so that as I'm working, you know, I'll get everything all loosened up. I'll take my bolts out. They're sitting on a dowel pin on both sides, so the head isn't going to like slide off. But if you jostle it, it will fall off. So I do like to get to the point where I just have a couple of bolts just like caught by a couple of threads, just as a safety precaution, so you don't have to worry about that. So you got a row of bolts inside the valve cover area, and then you got another row of bolts across the bottom that you see outside the exhaust ports. There's no like really hidden bolts or anything that you have to worry about. There's nothing you have to worry about that, you know, to disconnect or anything once you're at this point here. Double check all my bolts, make sure they're all loose. Should be able to grab it here and here, pull it like that. Got my two bolts that I hand screwed there in the end, just to make sure that I wasn't going to drop anything. And there we go, like that, boom. Okay, there we go. I'm going to pull this gasket off. This is all going to be trash. And doesn't look too bad inside of here. That's good. All right, we're going to repeat the process on the other side. Same thing here. I'm going to put a couple of twists on my bottom left and right head bolts here, just so that when I get all these loose, in case this thing just happens to be really loose, I don't have to worry about this head falling off and landing on my toe, breaking anything engine or on my toe. Okay, just go along, checking all my bolts, make sure they're all loose. There we go. Alright, we're loose now. These 2 bolts out. And bada bing, we're off. Bring the camera over, I'll show you what we got. So there you go. Small block Chevy, 11-1 pistons in it. The bores actually don't look too bad. We'll take a good look at them once we get it all apart. And that's where we're at. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to break out my Harmonic Balancer puller. We're going to pull this off. We'll take the cam cover off, and we'll pull the cam out. To take this Harmonic Balancer off, you're going to need a tool. You're going to need this puller. It's a, if you go to the parts store, they're pretty cheap. It looks like it's kind of got a triangle design to it that lines up with the 3 holes that are on here. You always want to look inside. Lots of times, this is an interference fit. So in other words, when this Harmonic Balancer is slid onto the crankshaft, it kind of just sticks on there. Sometimes you'll have a bolt that bolts it down, or the pulley that goes on here, they'll bolt that pulley through that pulley and into the crankshaft. Make sure that that's gone, or that's out. I'm going to take my puller comes in a little case and it's all apart. So what I'm going to do is put it together. So basically you got this screw that goes through the puller. Then you have this sexy little end right here that goes against your crankshaft that goes on this ball, so that when you're turning this, this isn't turning and it isn't going to mar the end of your crankshaft. So you get that going on. You got 3 bolts. You want to make sure that those 3 bolts will fit in here, which none of these do. And question being is, where are my bolts for this? Well, this is going to be fine thread, so I need to find out where my fine thread bolts are. So, somebody used my puller and evidently never put the bolts back in it, which brings me to another topic, loaning your tools out to people. It's always great. Loaning tools is like loaning money. Usually nothing good comes of it at the end. So you just kind of eyeball this and get this to the point where it's all these bolts are screwed in, so your plate is going to have a flat pull against your Harmonic Balancer. Then you can screw this thing in. You'll feel it hit the crankshaft. Once that happens, then you can go ahead and start tightening. And as this tightens, it's going to start walking this off. If you have a hard time and the crank's turning, you can put something on the flywheel on the crankshaft on the other end to hold it. You can hold your puller with something. There's lots of things you can do. Worst case scenario, I don't like to do it because they tell you not to, but you can put an impact on this, and the shock of it sometimes will pop the thing, pop it loose. You know, bottom line is, extreme situations require extreme measures, and not everything works like the shop manual. So, you know, you just gotta kind of go with the flow. So there we go. Okay, so my Harmonic Balancer is off. I'm going to take all my bolts and everything out, and I'm going to put them back in the box so that I have them for the next time, instead of having to scrounge around for something. Same with the puller. I'm going to put all that stuff away. This Harmonic Balancer is brand new, so I don't have to worry about replacing this or getting into replacing this. But if you do a new engine, you got an old Harmonic Balancer, it might be a good idea to buy a new one. You'll notice the seal rides on this area right here. If there's a groove in there, you can replace the balancer, or you can put a sleeve on here. It's just where the seal rides. You can see where this was used just a little bit. It's got a little line on there, but when you feel it, there's no groove. So we're good to go. We'll put this on the side, and I'm going to put these tools away. Alright, so I got a fuel pump block-off plate over here on the side of this engine. I'll bring the camera around to show it to you. Plate right here. This is if you run an electric fuel pump, so you don't have the mechanical fuel pump. So I'm going to take this off, and normally there'll be a fuel pump here. There'll be a drive rod that goes up to the cam. So when you take this out, you'll see a rod up in there. When I take this plate off, I'll show you what it looks like. Voila, and it's in there. I left it in there. That's good. Once again, keeping all my parts together with my bolts for so I can bag and tag it afterwards. So here we are. I got the plate off. This rod right here rides on the front lobe on the camshaft. You have to take this out before you can take the cam out. But there you go. The only reason I had this rod still in there is probably so I wouldn't lose it. Like I said, this engine was a display piece. We're in pretty good shape. The whole top of our engine apart. I do have this little oil pressure sender thing on the top. You want to make sure you have all of your fittings and stuff out of this before it goes to the machine shop. So I'll take that off now that I'm in this position. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip the engine upside down, because this lip for this oil, for the cam cover tucks into the front of the oil pan here. Like, so I'm going to take the oil pan off. I'll probably take these engine mounts off, and then we can get the cam up. All right. Okay, so here we go. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these motor mounts off. These are brand new motor mounts for my project. I'll get these out of the way. The big old honking stud hanging out of here. I really don't need that thing stuck in me. All right, so we got our engine mounts off. I do have an oil filter on here. I probably just to block up the area so we don't have to worry about anything going in there. Okay, so there's this is where your oil filter spins on. You're going to want to take this out. It's a little adapter. This just screws in here like this. There's no fancy anything in here you have to worry about, and bada bing, there you go. Okay, so now we're going to take the oil pan off. I got my 12-point wrenches here, and we're going to have at this. No real sequence or anything. You just kind of go along, get all your bolts out. All right, I got all my bolts out of my oil pan. I'm going to take and find a nice home. When we're off camera, I'll tag and bag all this stuff. You guys don't need to watch me do that. So I've got my oil pan loose. I think I can just take it right off. Lots of times these will be stuck on here. I would refrain against prying on this unless you have to. Lots of times what a lot of guys will do is put a big long block of wood like a 2x4 here and hit it with a dead blow. Lots of times that'll knock it off. If you are going to pry on it, you'll see where it's reinforced on either end for the end bolts. That's a good place to do it. I would use a putty knife, because really all you're trying to do, you're not trying to pry this off, you're trying to break the seal between the gasket and the oil pan, or the gasket and the block, whichever way you're in there. And once you get that loose, it'll pop right off. Then you get the thing off, get the oil pan off, and it's nice and clean like this. Here we go. We got our oil pump here. We've got our oil pan gaskets and seals. You can peel all that off. Bada bing. We can take all our bolts off, take our timing cover off, and like this tab that bolts on here is a timing tab. The one that I have here is adjustable. When we get into reassembly, I'll go into how you adjust it and make sure that your top dead center is actually true top dead center. Okay, now you're going to notice something kind of cool. This is a hot rodder piece right here. This is a 2-piece timing cover. I even forgot I put this on here. But most of the time your timing cover comes, there'll be a lip on here for this oil pan seal. This is a hot rodder special. It's so that you can take the timing cover off and change your cam without disturbing the seal for your oil pan. So this is kind of a cool little piece. I must have had it hanging around and that's why I used it. I had no intention of doing this. So there you go. So there's the piece where your lip is for your oil pan, and then there's your thing. So you maintain that integrity of that seal. If there's an Achilles heel with a small block Chevy, it's that oil pan seal on the front. You really, really want to make sure that that you have that on there and on here right and sealed properly, because it's a freaking nightmare when it leaks there. Because what happens is, you can picture this bolted in your vehicle, it leaks from here, and then the fan blows oil all down on the underneath of the car, and it's just painful, especially if you got anything kind of nice. All right, so here's your oil pump. We'll go ahead and take that off. When we put this back together, I'll show you how to set your pickup to the depth of your pan to make sure that you're not going to starve it for oil. There's no pump drive in this. It was sitting in that little bag in the valley when we took this apart. So, but normally what you'd see is on the end of this oil pump, the drive sits in here like a screwdriver. There's usually a little plastic collar there that snaps it together to hold it there. So that's not here, obviously. I just figured I'd show you that. All right. Now we got our timing chain. We don't have to worry about taking the gear off right at the moment, because all we're going to do, we're going to take these 3 bolts out of the cam gear, and then once we do that, we can take the chain off. We just walk the gear off, pick it up a little bit, and then the chain comes right off. Now the cam is just going to slide out. There's nothing holding it on. But the easiest way to do this is if you put your bolts back in here now, like this, hold that gear on there. Now you can use this gear as something to hang on to it. Now you got to realize when you're pulling this through, the cam lobes are small, the journals are large. So it's going to come out about an inch or so, and then you're going to feel a lobe, and then you're going to have to keep wiggling this. And what's nice about having this gear on here is it gives you that leverage so that you can hang on to it and basically wiggle it out. You try and be as nice to it as you can, because every time you bang something on those cam bearings, it's causing a little tick here or there, and you just don't want to do that. I'm going to replace these cam bearings, so that's not a big deal. And there's your camshaft with the gear on the end. So now here we go. We're down to the point of all we've got left is our pistons to come out. I'll bring the camera over here. Let me show you what's going on. So there's our cam all lined up on the bench like that. Our engine's upside down. Our oil pump's off. Our oil filter adapter is off. Obviously the cam cover's off. The cam is out. Now we're to this point. What we're going to do, we're going to rotate this engine. You'll notice the first thing that you want to do when you do this is you have to mark these, because every piston has to go back into the same hole. And every bearing cap has to go back with the same connecting rod. So now this was done old school way. The leading piston on the left bank is number 1 on a Chevy. So you can see a little tit mark that I put here, right? I'll see if I can get you so you can see it. You'll see a prick punch. There's 1 and 1. And then if you go over to the other side, what you're going to see is you're going to see a prick punch here, and it's telephoto you in a little bit. Like that. And then it's 2 and 2, and 3 and 3, and so on and so forth. So you rotate the engine and mark them all. A lot of guys have little tools that stamp numbers on them. You can do that too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bolt to go on the end of the crankshaft. I'm going to be able to rotate this, and we're going to start taking some pistons out. All right, folks, so I'm back. I didn't have a bolt to go on the end of the crankshaft. So what I did was I did this little trick that, you know, I do at times, is I slid the harmonic balancer back on here. I didn't put it on all the way, I just put it enough so it would catch the key on the end of the crankshaft. Put a couple of bolts from my puller in there, and then when I want to turn this, I can just take my bar, put my bar right in here and turn it. I mean, this is like, it turns pretty easy. We don't really have to, nothing crazy going on there. So here I am. I got this thing turned up so my connecting rod is high at me. My piston's going to be low in the bore. I'm going to take my connecting rod bolts off. Now the nuts really, it isn't really going to be that critical as far as which nuts go in what place. But all the other stuff that I showed you is. Okay, so now, once I get that off, it's going to come apart pretty easy. I don't think I took them all out. Put these all back together, like this. I'm leaving the bearings in the connecting rods right now, so that later on I can take a look at them, see what they look like. Okay, so I got my first two out. I'm going to turn this a little bit. I'm going to work on my next one. Right up there like that. My nut's off. And I'm just going to tap on the end of this a little bit with a dead blow. And that's going to get my my bearing cap loose. Almost. There it is. Now what I can do is I can rotate my crankshaft and force my piston all the way up to top dead center. Once I get it there, you want to make sure your connecting rod is lined up with your cylinder hole. And then once you have that like that, you're ready to take your piston out. I tap on the piston, you know, the end of the rod bolts a little bit with my hammer handle. And it's wooden, so I don't have to worry about it nicking anything. I want to be really careful in here because you don't want to nick the crankshaft. I got this out. As you can see, it's just kind of a process of repetition at this point. You just keep doing the same thing, working from front to back. Alright, so now we're down. We got all our pistons out. All laid out on the bench. So now I can take my balancer back off because I don't really need to turn this anymore. Hopefully I should be able to just tap on this and it should pop right back off. Yep. Love it when a plan works out. Alright, so now we're going to take the main bearing caps off. Okay, so I haven't prick punched any of these because they're marked. I will bring the camera over and I'll show you that. We got all of our pistons and everything out. And we're down to just the crankshaft. You'll notice that you got all these bearing caps. 1, 2, 3, 4 and the oil pump cap. If you look close, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, the factory is cast a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the oil cap. So we'll just make sure we put it back on the same way. Okay, got them all loose. I can knock them loose with my dead blow because they are pinned on there. 2. And my rear main. At this point, I have everything out. So what I can do is I can just basically take and lift this crankshaft right out and set it on the bench. Okay, so here we are. There's the crankshaft and the block. It's the only thing that's left of the whole deal. I got all my mains are off, and this is just sitting in here. So I'm going to put the camera back. I'm just going to grab both ends of this crankshaft, and I'm going to lift it straight up, and it's going to come right out. I grab it like this, and just gonna wiggle it a little bit and be ready because it is heavy. Seal, it's back here. Pop that off and throw it away. And yeah, I mean, I can go ahead and pop all these bearings out of here, which is what I'm gonna go ahead and do. Bing, bang, boom. I'm just gonna throw those away because I've already looked at them. The ones I got on the caps are going to be the wear items that I want to look at. All right, folks. So here we are. I'm going to bring the camera over. You can take a good look at this bare block here. So there's our bare block. You can look right down through the cylinder holes. This particular one here, I'll roll it over in a second. Some of these have got some small pits in it from the engine sitting for a long time. I'm hoping that that's going to hone right out. Let me rotate this. There you go. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're not really going to be able to see it. I mean, I can zoom in a little bit here, but because of the lighting, I don't think you're really going to be able to see. But yeah, there's some very, very light pitting for when this piston was down while it was in storage. Got a little corrosion on there. Hopefully it's not a big deal, and we can just run a hone through here. So I want to thank you for tuning into my video. So we have the engine all disassembled. I've got the bench behind the camera has got all of my parts laid out on it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get everything cleaned. I'm going to pop all my rings and bearings off all of my stuff. I'm going to bag and tag everything. A lot of guys don't do it. They know where the bolts go, whatever. I like to bag and tag. That way there I get everything's clean. It's in little bags. I can put it in a big plastic container, put it under the bench or store it wherever. My projects tend to be whenever I can do them. I do a lot of different things at a lot of different times. So if I'm really organized and have everything properly labeled and bagged, I can let something sit for 6 months, and when I decide to get back into that job, I just take that container out, boom, everything's there. I'm like, all right, where are my bolts for this? Where are my screws for that? I have them. You can do this however way you want. So I appreciate you tuning in to V-Twins to V8s, and I'll keep you posted on the progress. So the next thing will be I'll get this stuff over to the machine shop. They'll do all the miking and everything on it. What'll happen is they'll take a look at this. They'll make some measurements on it and see if it's something we can save or if we have to rebore it. They'll hot tank it. They'll put new freeze plugs in it, and they'll put new cam bearings in it. At that point, it'll be ready to rock and roll. Same kind of deal with the crankshaft. The crankshaft will be mic'd. We'll check it for any scoring, check the size, make sure it's within tolerance. That'll also be micro polished and cleaned, and then that'll be ready to go. Any repairs that need to be done, if we gotta bore the block a little bit more, if we gotta cut the crankshaft to undersize it, we'll deal with those as we go along. The pistons and rods will go to be cleaned and checked for cracks, and magnaflux them to make sure there's no cracks in any of the rods or the pistons. Same with the block, and at that point we'll have everything we need to get back from the machine shop to put together the short block. In the meantime, I'll be working on the heads and see whether I want to use these heads or if I want to buy new heads. But thanks for tuning in to V-Twins to V8s.com. Check us out on our website, check us out on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in.